Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have a fun video today because we're gonna talk about breastfeeding. I'm gonna give you my tips and also just kind of share my journey this second time around with my new baby, because I feel like there's always differences with everything you do with your second baby, and that includes breastfeeding. All right, so first let's talk about my experience this second time around, because my baby is a few months old now. We've gotten our groove and everything, so I feel like I can now talk about what I've experienced. It's been definitely a little bit different. The first time around, you know, I was one of those moms that wanted to just like make everything perfect. I wanted to breastfeed for sure, no formula until necessary, and make sure that everything was right. I feel like that put a little bit unnecessary stress on me. So this time around, when we were in the hospital, I took a much different approach. First off, I let I tried to breastfeed right away, which was the same with my first baby. I immediately start to breastfeed as soon as possible. And if you don't know, the first milk that you get is called colostrum. It doesn't look like the kind of milk that we associate with milk. It's clear, it's full of like antibodies and just good stuff, nutrients that your baby needs when they're newborns or when they're first born. So that experience was exactly the same, because I had a C-section the first time and I had a C-section the second time. And both times, the minute that they rolled me into the recovery room, there's like kind of like a in-between recovery room, they put the baby on my chest and my baby started breastfeeding right away. When I say that they start breastfeeding right away, I don't mean that it was like perfect like latch and everything went smooth and it was like, oh, this is amazing, they're eating fine and now we're just on, it's on. Instead, it's more like I felt like it was just one of those things where it's like, let your baby kind of do their thing and just see how you vibe together and everything. So I just kind of let it be like that this time around too. But the thing that was different the second time around was my baby was born just over 6 pounds. And at first I had a ton of colostrum. Like it was to the point where like I could squeeze it and like it would just shoot out. I had that much. By the second day, which was even kind of like less than 24 hours actually, my colostrum for some reason had like almost completely stopped coming out. The baby seemed like she was really hungry. She was losing a lot of weight. After a C-section, they tend to lose a little bit more weight because they're pumped with all of the stuff that you're pumped with, like your IV and everything. So they lose all of that liquid essentially that they had, just like you did. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but she dropped down like 10 ounces or something like that. And it made one of the nurses during her night shift, it was a night shift nurse, a little bit nervous that we might need to have to monitor her and everything. So I decided this time around to, instead of stressing it and like feeling like I had to put my baby on my boob every second, I just asked for formula. I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna ask for some formula. So the nurse didn't complain at all. She brought me formula. They brought me the Similac Gentle-Ease formula, and the baby took it very easily. She was, totally fine with it. There didn't seem to be any issues. She took it fine. And then I could also try to breastfeed her too. And it just felt so much easier, because I wasn't stressed about it this time. And I knew that I was gonna continue to just breastfeed. All I was doing was supplementing with the formula while I'm in the hospital, because I wanted my baby to gain the weight and I wanted to be able to leave the hospital with a nice, healthy, plump baby. I definitely got questions from, like some of the other nurses as their shifts changed and everything. They definitely were like, oh, you're not gonna breastfeed, or you're only doing formula? Are you gonna just move the baby only to formula? Even my OBGYN, when he walked in the next morning to check on me, he saw the formula sitting on the table next to me and he was like, oh, you're not breastfeeding? And I was just like, I'm just taking it easy. And when, my baby's pediatrician came in and saw I had a little bit of formula to help her just gain some weight for the hospital stay, she was like, cool, get her plump, let's do this. Just, when you just try to breastfeed her as much as you can too, so that you're not losing the chance to make milk and signal to your boobs that you're gonna be breastfeeding. And then when we got home, I continued to supplement for like maybe one bottle for about one bottle for about a week. But I just continued to breastfeed, and she was cluster feeding because she was so small. She only can take so much milk at one time, and then she'll want to eat pretty quickly after that. And then I started to realize like she wasn't really needing the bottle anymore because she was doing fine with just breastfeeding. And so after a week, I moved her to exclusively breastfeeding, and that's what we've been doing for the past 3.5 months. And it's been a really easy shift. And so I'm gonna share my tips with you and what I've learned. All right, so tip 1 is gonna be my same tip that I had in my last breastfeeding video, and that's to be confident because we have these newborns and we're kind of like scared of each other at first and stuff. They seem so fragile. It's very intimidating to try to breastfeed your baby. You put so much pressure on wanting to breastfeed, and I think your baby senses that. You know, they're human beings at the end of the day, and it's hard for us to see them as that sometimes because they're just babies, right? And they don't seem like somebody that we can talk to or anything like that, and they don't necessarily understand what we're saying to them, but they understand our body language and the way we're acting. So I think just going into it being confident, even if you're doing it wrong, I think it's totally fine. I think that is how you find your groove with your baby. And when I say be confident, it's like, I just kind of like put my baby on my boob. Maybe they weren't latching on correctly or something like that, but I let them just kind of do their thing. And I just acted like this was totally the way it was supposed to be. And this is how we're gonna do this. And I feel like that confidence going into the breastfeeding really helped me with the experience overall. All right, my next tip is a really important one and one that I ignored a lot the first time around, and that is to take care of yourself. And what I mean by that is obviously you're not gonna get that much sleep, you're feeling stressed out and everything when you first have your baby, but you need to feed yourself. You need to have your nutrients, you need to take your own medication because that is going to be key later on down the line while you're breastfeeding if you wanna keep your supply up, if you wanna feel healthy, and if you wanna just feel good in general. For instance, my OBGYN was like, you have to stay on your prenatals even though you're not pregnant anymore. Take your prenatal vitamins because when you're breastfeeding, you're giving up all of your nutrients essentially. So like you're giving everything literally to your baby. And so you need to stay healthy, not just for the baby, but because you need to keep everything going, right? You don't wanna get tired. You don't wanna like lose all those nutrients and get sick or anything like that. So you wanna make sure that you're taking care of yourself. I think one of the reasons why I decided not to stay on my prenatal vitamins last time was because I didn't like them. I don't really enjoy the process of taking any kind of supplements, and so this time around when I was pregnant, I made sure to get on vitamins that I actually didn't mind. And I say that, like, it's hard for me to say that I love any vitamins, so I had to find the ones that I didn't mind. The reason why it's super important to take your vitamins and any medication, and I throw in medication because I have Hashimoto's, which is a hypothyroidism, and I didn't really stay on track with monitoring my thyroid levels while I was breastfeeding because I just didn't even think about it, how important that was. But I started to feel like crap while I was breastfeeding the first time around. I started feeling lethargic, my thyroid levels got all over the place, I started to just not have all the nutrients that I needed, all the vitamins and the minerals that I needed in my body. I didn't realize like how much I was lacking all of that stuff. And so by the time I was like at 4 months of breastfeeding, I almost didn't want to do it anymore. And I had so much anxiety and I felt tired and everything just felt really terrible while breastfeeding, and I didn't realize that I was kind of causing that by not taking care of myself and giving myself my nutrients back and taking my medicine. So that's something to just keep in mind. The prenatal that I decided to take actually right before I got pregnant was this one. It's by Ritual. These are the essential prenatal vitamins that they have. I had actually been on their multivitamin before and I really liked it, which is saying a lot because I don't like vitamins, period, at all. Like it's very, very hard to get me to stay on a vitamin. And apparently they've got like a no nausea capsule. I don't really know what that means, but I will tell you most vitamins make me want to gag and these do not. I assume it has something to do with the capsule, but I also assume it has something to do with the scent that it has because a lot of vitamins can have that like, it's just a vitamin smell. It doesn't smell good at all. These have a citrus scent to them and it's so much easier to take. You're supposed to take them with food, but what I do, and this was suggested by my doctor, is I take them right before I go to bed, so I don't even think twice about it. It's like part of my nighttime ritual. I take these and I also take an additional iron supplement. There is iron in these. I was very iron deficient. I became very anemic towards the very end of my pregnancy. It got even worse after I had the baby, especially after a C-section. So my doctor had me get on an additional iron supplement, and so that's been very helpful. It's one of the ways that I've made sure that I feel so much better. Another thing that caught my eye with Ritual vitamins from the very beginning actually was that they don't have anything that's shady in here. Like I always used to hear before I even got pregnant that a lot of vitamins are unnecessary because they just, one, they like go right through you, you just pee them out. 2, they just contain a ton of filler. Like you always hear that there's like a ton of filler in vitamins and they do nothing for you and stuff. And so when these came out, I was very interested in them because they actually tell you all about like where they source these vitamins, what you're getting, the amount. They're very just clear. And they also, if it matters to you, they happen to be vegan friendly as well, which I know can sometimes be a big issue for people that are looking for vitamins that they love. It's a big deal for me because I don't like when vitamins have things like fish oil and stuff. I burp it up and it's just absolutely nasty. You don't get any of that with these. Like it's just a very smooth process. You take your vitamins and it doesn't affect your day whatsoever. And that's just a huge deal to me. Another reason why I like them is because it's a subscription service. So you just continue to get them every single month. So in the beginning, I wasn't like, before I was pregnant, I was like falling off a little bit with taking my prenatal vitamin because it didn't feel as important to me. So I would get that notification like, you're about to get your subscription in the mail, and then you can push it off a couple of days so that you like get back on track and then you get your vitamins. That way you're not like just building up a ton of vitamins in your medicine cabinet. So that's something that I like about it too, is that it just kind of reminds me to get my vitamins. And because I've been talking about these vitamins for so long, like you guys can literally go back through some of my videos and you will see that I have been talking about Ritual vitamins for a very long time. If you guys are interested in these, I got you 10% off of your first 3 months of the subscription. So I'll leave all the information below in the description box. Click on the link and subscribe because these are, you guys, they're absolutely my favorite vitamins. I don't say that lightly because I hate vitamins, I really do. So these are like vitamins for people that hate vitamins, which I think is pretty much everybody. And you really do get everything that you need in your prenatal with these vitamins. As far as an actual prenatal or even just a multivitamin, these are the way to go. I highly, highly recommend them. My next tip is to ask for help when you need it. I'm actually referring to like the nurses in the hospital, the lactation consultants, your parents, you know, your husband, anybody. Like there are so many people that can help. First I'll start with like the lactation consultants and the nurses and the doctors. They have lots of advice, they have lots of rules, and they can be very forceful with what they believe, you know, you should be doing as you breastfeed. And I feel like that can sometimes cause unnecessary stress. Both experiences with my babies, when they first came out, I didn't know I was doing it wrong. I didn't know, for instance, that, you know, the baby has to have like their entire mouth over your complete nipple and stuff like that. I didn't know like that's how you do it. And it was totally fine for me, but the minute the lactation consultant got involved and the nurses, and again, they meant well, right? They're there to help you, and then they like implement all these rules and they're like they're really rough with you. I have yet to experience somebody who's not rough with you when they're a lactation consultant. They like grab your boob and they're like shoving in the baby's mouth and stuff. And you know, I even think about Isla this past time. We kind of had like a thing going, and then when the colostrum wasn't coming out, then one of the nurses was like, you shouldn't introduce the formula, you should try to just continue breastfeeding, you need to just like force it on her and stuff. And she literally, while I'm sitting there like in the hospital bed, grabs my boob while I'm holding my baby and like shoved it into her mouth. And again, she means well. She wants me to continue breastfeeding. She doesn't want me to like make formula the way I fed my baby, and I get that. It felt like too much, right? And so this time, luckily, I was like, I just kind of ignored it because I was a lot more confident about it as a second-time mom. But keep that in mind. It's like they mean well, but they're like enforcing all of these rules, and you almost feel like you've got like a nanny yourself, or like you've got like police on you about how you're supposed to breastfeed your baby and the right way to do things. And in some ways, I think that just puts more stress on you. So I think kind of go with your own flow first, and you'll start to notice like, okay, so this isn't working. Wait, this isn't working. You know, oh, I'm starting to get really sore. I'm getting like these blisters and stuff. And then that's when you ask questions, because when you go into it too soon, trying to ask for all this help and this advice, you get too much at once, and it feels very, very stressful. And then when I say ask for help, I also mean when you need the help, don't be afraid to ask for the help, because that also makes a huge difference. Because I think sometimes we sit there silently and like agonize over things, and we don't actually voice it. We just expect everybody to understand that we're stressed out. We're really stressed out, and we don't really know how to ask for that help. So ask your husband to hold the baby. Ask your parents to, you know, give you some advice. Ask the lactation consultant at the hospital or the nurses to give you some advice if you're seeing that something isn't working. So it's one of those things where it's like, don't go into it too soon with like the professionals, I guess is my point, but don't be afraid to ask when you actually do need the help. Next tip, don't be afraid to introduce a bottle. And I actually truly mean this. I've heard so many people talk about nipple confusion, that if you introduce a bottle too quickly to your baby, that they'll just prefer that bottle and they never want to breastfeed with you again. I have yet to experience that with my own babies, with babies of my friends, with my family. I have yet to experience a baby who decided to switch from mom's nipples to a bottle. In fact, it's actually the other way around usually, and that's trying to get your baby to now take a bottle. And I say introduce a bottle, and I mean it like pretty quickly into it, because it takes a lot of stress off of you. And that is so important, because at the end of the day, taking that stress off of you is one of the best things that you can do when you are breastfeeding, because you do feel so much stress just in general as a new mom. So giving your baby a bottle early on is one way to take some stress off of you, because one, you're teaching your baby how to use a bottle if they need to, and that means that dad can help you feed the baby, at least take one feeding off of you, so maybe you can go sleep a little bit or something. Two, you don't feel the anxiety that I felt the first time around, and that was that I was the only person that could feed my baby, and so without me, my baby might starve or something. I had all this anxiety around it. I know so many people that waited way too long, like they waited till the baby was like 4 or 5 months, 6 months, and at that point, the baby definitely had a preference for mom's boobs and did not want a bottle, and you can't blame the baby. The baby's like, wait, we've been doing this whole time, and now you want to introduce this, this fake boob to me, and you expect me to take the bottle now? Like, that makes complete sense that the baby doesn't want to do it now. So it's one of those things, like when you finally do feel like you need to have a life, or you need to go back to work and stuff, it takes that stress off of doing it then, and forcing it on your baby. Instead, now you've just gotten a groove, and your baby can do either. You can leave the house if you need to without the baby, and you know that somebody can feed the baby, and you're totally fine. And that, honestly, it takes so much stress off of you. Speaking of bottles, that leads me into my next tip, and that's to introduce formula if you need to. I feel like there is way too much pressure out there to just 100% exclusively breastfeed your baby and not use any formula. I don't know why that is, to be honest. I feel like in my mom's generation, like using formula was no biggie, and maybe even sometimes preferred. I get it. Breastfeeding is really great for your baby. It's very healthy. You're giving them the antibodies they need. You're giving them nutrients that they need and stuff. But formula feeds them. And if you need to introduce formula, feed your baby. And I totally agree with like fed is best. I don't think you should put that pressure. But I also go back to the more stress you put on yourself, the less successful you're gonna be with breastfeeding. So if your baby is crying, your baby is hungry, the baby just needs some formula. Introduce formula while you're trying to figure things out, because it's not terrible. If you want to exclusively breastfeed, but it's not working out, then you might have to take a step back, supplement a little bit, and then get back on track and figure things out. You wanna make sure your baby stays healthy first and foremost, but you also wanna make sure you don't have that added stress on yourself, because it's just not gonna be helpful. So next tip is to pump with knowledge. And knowledge is the key word here, you guys. When I had my first baby, the pediatrician had told me not to pump too quickly, like to wait like 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks maybe, before I start pumping, because she was like, you don't want to get too engorged, and you don't want to like, throw off the whole schedule and stuff. And while I think that's actually really sound advice, for some people it's not very realistic to not start pumping right away, partially because some of us have to go back to work. I actually had not planned any maternity leave, unfortunately, my first baby, so I knew I had to work right away, and it was giving me so much anxiety to not have some extra milk for my baby. But two, sometimes we just like want to pump because we want to just get ahead of it. Like some people are just type A, and we want to like have some milk storage and stuff like that. So if you want to pump early on, then make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into, because you can totally pump. You can start pumping whenever you want. The reason why the doctors suggest, and lactation consultants will suggest, not to start pumping right away is because when you're first starting to breastfeed, your milk is trying to regulate itself. And the way it's trying to regulate itself is to your baby's schedule, like the feedings that your baby needs. So when you start pumping, when I say pump with knowledge, it's knowing that you're getting yourself into that kind of a situation. And even when your baby starts to regulate and get more on a schedule and doesn't eat like every 5 minutes and eats more like every hour or 2 or 3 hours, your boobs might need to have some release. So what I would suggest is to kind of put your pumping on a schedule and know that you're kind of committing to pumping even if your baby's not eating at that time, like you have to then pump to get that milk out. So you're getting yourself into that kind of a commitment, and that's totally fine. It's just knowing that you're doing that. This time around, I waited like a month before I started pumping, and I did feel like my boobs were starting to regulate a little bit, but the way I first started pumping was I would feed my baby and then I would go pump right after. I'd give it like 10, 15 minutes or so. That way I could have another letdown, because if you just kind of like go right into pumping after your baby has eaten, especially if your baby ate a lot, you might not get anything into the pump and then it just feels like you wasted 5-10 minutes doing it. So I always wait a little bit so that I have another letdown, and then it just releases all the milk again. And then it would just basically catch all the rest of the milk that I had kind of like sitting in that period of time. That said, if you do want to pump just to relieve yourself because you can't stand this engorgement that you're getting, maybe you're getting like that swelling in the lymph nodes and stuff like I was talking about. If you don't want to actually commit to pumping just for storage of milk, what I do recommend, and this is my next tip actually, I recommend to get a silicone pump. When I say silicone pump, there are several brands out there. I got both of these on Amazon. One of them is the brand Nature Bond, the other is Haka. There are not that many differences between these. Like some people will tell you have to get a Haka. Some people will tell you have to get the Nature Bond. They're essentially the same thing. Like the Haka has like a little bit of a lip to it on the opening, whereas like the Nature Bond does not. So it's just kind of the same thing. But the way you use these is you squeeze it and you just plop it onto your boob, and it suction cups it basically. So these are like suction cups for your boobs. So you can just like let them be on there. Some people like say they put it on one of their boobs to just catch that excess milk that comes out while they're feeding on the other boob. But what I would do with these instead was when I felt like I just needed to relieve my boobs a little bit and the baby was sleeping or just did not want to eat, I would pop these on. So I got two. I wanted to try both brands because I wanted to see if there was a difference. There's really not much of a difference at all, besides that whole lip thing. And I did find that I guess that lip helped it stay on maybe a touch better, but again, not a big difference. And the Nature Bond actually comes with something that you can use to like plug it. So it has a little lid to it and stuff, which I also find to be helpful if you're gonna put this on the side table at night and you don't wanna spill it. Those are like little things that you can go and decide when you look at the descriptions. But you just pop those on. And I would do this if I just wanted to relieve myself, and I would just let it fill up for like an ounce or two, and then I'd be good to go, and I'm not committing to having to pump all the time. I was helping to relieve it, so I wasn't getting like mastitis or getting like any plugged ducts or anything like that. Instead, I was just relieving. I would actually save some of that milk, and then it would be like test runs with the bottle for the baby. So then my husband or my nanny or my mom, anybody could try to like give her a little bit of bottle milk before I would feed her. Speaking of pumping, my next tip is that you can get a pump through your health insurance. You know, somebody actually told me the first time around, so I was lucky enough to do that. The health insurance that I had when I had Nikosh made the process super simple. They just had like a website I needed to go to. I typed in my information, and then I got to pick out a pump, and they just like mailed it to me really, really quickly. That was awesome. The health insurance that I have now, it was a little bit more of a process. I had to like call my health insurance and figure out like who it was that I needed to contact, and then they gave me another number of a place I needed to contact, and those people were like, we need a prescription from your doctor and stuff. But they kind of helped in the sense of like they actually like requested the prescription from my doctor and then popped it into the mail, and I got to choose between like 4 different ones that they had to offer. So it was a little bit more of a process, and it took a little bit longer to get. I was already like 3 weeks postpartum by the time I received that one. So that's something to keep in mind. Like while you can get a free pump, and actually both pumps have been really great. They've been pumps that you can actually go and like do research on. You should plan for this. If you haven't had your baby yet, you should definitely like get on this right away and look into it, because it could be a process. Like I said, the first time around with the health insurance I had with Nikosh, it was like smooth and very fast. Second time around, it wasn't as smooth. It wasn't terrible either, but it did take a little while to get that pump. My next tip is to weigh your baby. And so the way you do that is you get a baby scale, but it's so much easier these days. I didn't have one when I had Nikosh because I didn't even think this was a thing. This time around, I got the Hatch Baby changing pad that happens to be a scale too. And the reason why it's important to weigh your baby when you're breastfeeding, especially if you're a first-time mom, it will help give you peace of mind. The reason why it's helpful and it gives you peace of mind is because the one issue when you're breastfeeding is you're not really sure how much milk your baby is getting. And so you want to make sure that your baby is gaining weight. there are two things you can use the scale for. One is you can just track like every day if you want, or every couple of days, every 3 days, whatever it is, like whatever's gonna ease your mind. You can weigh your baby and see the weight that they're gaining. You can weigh them right before you breastfeed them and then weigh them again afterwards just to see how much weight they gain after you've actually fed them, because that tells you that they took a lot of milk or if they didn't at all. I highly recommend the Hatch Baby changing pad. I think there might be other brands too. It's just, this is the one that I got and that I like, and it's very easy to use. And it does help give you peace of mind. I've now started to like just use it, just once a month to see how much weight she's gained, just for my own curiosity. But in the first month, especially with her and with breastfeeding, it really eased my mind. All right, next tip, and with baby Isla because she got hungry. And see, look, I'm using a bottle. Next tip is to find the positions that work for you. It was one of those things, like both times I was in the hospital, the nurses and the lactation consultants were like insistent that I was holding my baby wrong. And I think that's so annoying. I get that they're trying to be helpful. No. But she, for instance, hates to be held like this. Like, she hates it. Look, see, she's fighting me. She gets so mad. She likes to be spread out and just laid out like this. And so for her, like the typical positions to hold her didn't really work as well for breastfeeding. What I found works for her the best is to like lay down next to her and to like do the lay down position where you like put your boob in her mouth and then she like falls asleep that way and stuff. She by far prefers this. Obviously it doesn't always work out that way. Like sometimes you just gotta feed your baby the way you gotta feed your baby. And as you get more comfortable with breastfeeding, you can figure those things out. But in the beginning, you just kind of wanna do what's gonna work for you. And so just remember that, like you gotta find your position with your baby because they're human beings and they have preferences. And while like Nikosh was like super easy to feed, like any position basically, she's very particular about the positions that she wants to be in. Next tip is to drink liquids, just liquids in general, you guys. I highly suggest water, but I know for some people it's really hard to just drink water. But essentially what I found is, and this is not scientific, I haven't Googled this, I haven't been told this by a doctor or anything like that, but you're essentially giving up your liquid to the baby by breastfeeding, so you need to replenish that liquid. So like whenever you feel like maybe your milk supply might be low or something like that, drink a cup of water, drink some water, because it really does help to have that liquid replenished, because you can feel it, like your skin gets dehydrated, like you just feel dried out and stuff and you're so thirsty. And that's because your baby is taking all of your liquid from you. So you want to replenish with water or with anything else that's gonna be like a really good liquid, like a juice or something like that. Just keep in mind, juices might make you gain weight. So that's something that you need to, definitely think about. I prefer water with some lemon in it, and that always helps me. In the beginning, I was like all about like drinking the teas and buying the cookies or making the cookies that are gonna help, get your milk supply up and stuff. But honestly, what I have found is it's really just replenishing that liquid. My next tip is to keep in mind that not everyone loses weight when they're breastfeeding. I happen to be one of those people, annoyingly, that gains weight while I am breastfeeding, and that's because you're using a lot of calories, like losing calories, I suppose, while you're breastfeeding, but that also makes you hungry in turn. And I'm one of those people that's like, when I'm hungry, I'm like, I'm hungry. Like I wanna eat a lot, and it's not necessarily healthy food, I just wanna eat. Like I just kinda wanna put snacks in my mouth and stuff, and just keep eating. And what I found was last time I was drinking tons of juices because I was so thirsty. I was eating tons of like not healthy snacks and stuff, and I gained so much more weight actually while I was breastfeeding, I felt like, than I did maybe even while I was pregnant. So that's just something to keep in mind. Just because you're breastfeeding, and a lot of people tend to lose weight while they breastfeed, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to, because I know I definitely don't lose weight while I'm breastfeeding, I gain it. So just know that that's normal too if you're not losing the weight, and don't beat yourself up about it. If you're breastfeeding, and it's all about caring for your baby, and obviously caring for yourself too, but just being kind to yourself, really. And I guess all of that brings me down to my final tip for breastfeeding, and that's don't put pressure on yourself. Honestly, it is hard to be a mom. I know, it is, it's hard. She's not into it. She doesn't want me to, she was like worried that I was gonna squeeze her because she hates to be squeezed. She needs her freedom. Just remember that, don't put pressure on yourself. It's hard, you guys, this is hard to be a mom. It's hard to be a working mom. It's hard to just be a new mom in general. So don't put pressure on yourself. You will get through this. If you breastfeed and you do it successfully, congratulations. If you don't, congratulations. You still have a healthy baby that you can feed formula. And with all that said, I'm gonna go put my boob in my baby's mouth because that's what she really wants right now. She's tired. Thanks so much for watching this video. Find me on Instagram at Susan Yara. Baby, say hi, say bye-bye, say sorry, I'm hungry. And I will talk to you guys soon. Leave any comments and questions and everything below. Bye guys, I gotta go.